This week at the Net Cafe, consumer protection online. Worried about that collectible you bought on eBay? Not to worry, you can safely put your money in escrow at this site, iescrow.com. Meet Larry Lozanne. He'll help you maintain your privacy online by standing between you and all those sites that want to grab your personal information. Doing some day trading? Better check out this site, Bloomberg.com, to keep up on the latest online investment scams. This is Kathy Lee. Her website has lots of useful consumer information in 7 different languages. And if you're worried about legislative attempts to control the net, log on to consumernet.org for an update on current bills in your state legislature. Consumer Protection Online, coming up next at the Net Cafe.
The Net Cafe is made possible in part by BigStar.com, with thousands of videos and DVDs for the whole family. Additional support by TechWeb for up-to-the-minute technology news. And by TVA, Television Associates, bridging the worlds of computers and video with DVD authoring and MPEG encoding services.
Hi, and welcome to the Net Cafe. We're here at Club I in San Francisco as usual, and this week talking about consumer protection online. You know, the web is great for bringing buyers and sellers together and letting everyone do business online, but it is also a potential minefield full of dangers for the gullible online customer. One especially sketchy area is online investing and online investment tips in particular. Andrew has more on that.
Patrick, you're the West Coast Bureau Chief of Bloomberg News here in San Francisco, actually. The headlines have been filled recently with folks either investing and making a lot of money or just going out with big net IPOs and things like that. A lot of money to be made, also a lot of potential for fraud. In fact, you guys were involved in a fraudulent case just recently. Tell me a little about the PairGain story.
Well, an engineer for PairGain allegedly set up a website that looked exactly like ours with a false report that said that PairGain was going to be acquired by an Israeli company. It turned out the report was false, but in the meantime, it went out on the web and a lot of investors picked up on it. The stock went up 30%.
30 in one day?
Yes.
In a matter of a few hours?
In a matter of a few hours.
Right.
And the company quickly denied it. The stock fell to its appropriate level, and a lot of investors got hurt.
Right. So this is a high-stakes game. I mean, basically, a fraud like that, it could be tens, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars of valuation going up and down in a matter of hours. It's a lot of money to be made.
A lot of money to be made, a lot of money to be lost.
Right. Okay. So in the case of PairGain, what basically happens to this person who possibly perpetrated this?
Well, he has been arrested and indicted by a federal grand jury. Bloomberg is suing the suspect, and the Securities and Exchange Commission is also suing the suspect for securities fraud.
So a lot of information out there. The question is, how do you tell the good from the bad, and what are the sites that that are more reputable right off the bat?
It's really a matter of using common sense. If somebody came up to you on the street and said, buy this stock, you'd want to check it out. You'd want to check it out with as many resources as possible. And that's the good thing about the internet. It offers you that ability to check on a company, on a stock, and its prospects using different websites.
So where do you go? What are some of the sites that you find as a journalist?
Well, personally, I use Bloomberg.com.
Okay, I'm sure.
But there are other very good sites by established news organizations. A lot of the major newspapers I use to double check the sites. There are some of the same major portal sites that are used by scamsters are actually pretty good in terms of providing news and information.
So you're talking about the Yahoos and the Excites and those kind of companies.
AOL and Quicken.com.
Right. Okay. So now that's one thing is sort of outright fraud, and then there's also kind of the rumor mill that takes place on the web. And you mentioned the portal sites. Most of them have chat centers where average investors are going up, and I heard this and I heard that, and what do people do with that kind of information? Does it ricochet around the web and sort of take on a life of its own?
You have to be very careful. I mean, you don't know. You have to consider the source. Who's putting out this information and why? Yeah. And a lot of times it's people on these chat boards that just aren't qualified as investment advisors or have their own self-interest at heart. So take it with a grain of salt, double check and verify.
Right. Okay, now if people do feel that they're finding some fraud on the web or something that they want to complain about, where can people go to submit information?
You can call or write the Securities and Exchange Commission. The problem there is that they receive something like 300 complaints a day on online investing frauds. And they don't have all the resources and the money to catch up with the scamsters.
Right.
So it's a growing problem.
So the web has created a whole new set of problems for the SEC.
Exactly. It's really incumbent on the individual investor to get the right information and to do their homework.
Right, right. So it sounds a little bit like buyer and seller beware, but just do your homework and you'll probably be all right.
Right, investor beware.
For URLs of today's featured websites, just go to the NetCafe site at cmptv.com. Well, it seems you can't go anywhere on the web these days without being asked to register, fill out a form, and become part of some vendor's database. And the question is, should we have to put up with all of this stuff just to get some information off the web? And I guess that's the problem you're dealing with, Larry. Your baby is PrivaSeek, which is an attempt to solve this problem of all the information that people want from us out there on the web. Before we get to what you're doing on the site, and I guess Persona is the product, right?
Yes.
What's the problem? Just explain to me what happens after I fill out that form and I give everybody my name and my address and the magazines I read and what I like and what I don't like. I have the picture that this all goes to some machine which turns it into instant junk mail.
Yeah. Well, in many cases, it could be a pretty accurate picture. I think today, one of the problems is you don't really know what happens unless you take the time, and the site has provided you, like many sites do, with some information relative to what their policies are.
Yeah, but frankly, who reads that stuff? Yeah, here, read our policy over here. You're just going to do it because you want to get to the next page.
Exactly. You want to get it immediately at what the value is to me. You want to be able to fill out the information quickly and have some assurance that the information is not going to wind up in the junk.
But generally, you don't have that assurance, right? I mean, that's the problem. So there's this thing now called an infomediary, which is what you are. And define what an infomediary is.
Well, an infomediary is someone that you can trust to help you bring that information and automate it and feel reasonably assured that the information that you're putting in isn't going to be violated in ways that you don't want it to be.
All right, so you're somehow like a kind of middleman who goes in there, and I give you my information, and you give my information to the guy on the web who wants it.
Yes.
Now, why is that better for me as the user? I mean, why, frankly, should I trust you at PrivaSeek any more than I'm going to trust Amazon.com with my stuff?
Because you're in control of determining how you want your information to be used. You get to tell all the websites, here's how I want my information to be used.
How do I do that?
You basically use our tool, which we call it a persona, and a valet. The valet is actually the tool that deposits information, and it makes determinations as to what a site wants to do with your information and what you've said you want to do with the information.
All right, so do I just fill in one form and create my persona in PrivaSeek, and that's it?
That's it.
The next time I go to a website, I say, call those guys, I already filled it in?
Right, and it fills in the form for you, lets you know that it filled in the form, and how you can track what is it that they're going to use your information
and now
for.
How do I do that? How do I know what they're going to do with it? How do I track that?
Because PrivaSeek maps all the websites in terms of what their information policies are and tells you what those policies are, oftentimes before the information actually gets put into their form, so that you know, I don't want my name put on a junk mail list.
Right.
So therefore, well, guess what? This site may be doing that, so you may want to be careful in putting in information into this site. Here's some alternative sites that'll do the same thing for you.
I see. Now, your site would do that for me and say, hey, this is not a good place, this is a good place?
Yes, right.
Now, you have to have, I assume, partnerships then with these other sites who are going to accept you as the intermediary.
Right.
And how do you do that? You just running out there signing deals with guys?
What we do is go out and build arrangements with other companies to do what we call PrivaSeek certified vendors to consumers. And being a certified vendor means the value to the vendor is they're going to get high-quality, permissioned audiences come to their site. The value to the consumer is that they're going to have a trust source that they can go to that is going to handle their information in the way they want.
So somebody's going to pay you for this, right? I assume the vendor is finding value, so the vendor's paying you for this job you're doing as intermediary?
Correct. And ultimately, down the road, we see probably some value-added services to consumers, although the base tools that we provide are free.
We should I guess there's a positive side to all this too, right? I mean, as a consumer, it's useful in some ways. For instance, with airlines, I like the fact that these airlines send me an email every week because they know who I am and where I like to go and where I live. So is there a positive way to spin this information that you do?
Sure is. Actually, the airline model is a good model. It's teaching other companies how to get up to speed relative to a whole relationship with the consumer in which the consumer is highly permissioned and an active participant instead of the company assuming that the consumer wants to be talked to. The consumer can engage with that company a lot better.
Last point, we hear told that someday somebody's actually going to pay me for this information.
Right.
And maybe somebody say, hey, for a buck or whatever, you know, give us this stuff. Is that ever going to happen on the web,
yeah.
do you think?
Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar information exchange business. And now we're in an information economy where you and I are part of that. So we might as well get our cut.
Okay, and it's privacy.com?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Larry. For URLs of today's featured websites, just go to the NetCafe site at cmptv.com. One of the fastest growing areas of e-commerce and doing trading online is, of course, the online auction, places like eBay. One of the potential problems, though, is you don't know exactly who you're buying the stuff from, and you're never quite sure that you're actually going to get what you paid for. There is a solution, though, and Andrew has more on that.
Sanjay, you're from iescrow.com, and to be honest with you, until I bought my house a year ago, I really didn't know what escrow was all about. It was definitely valuable in the home buying process. Now you guys are telling me I need escrow on the web as well. What's the situation out there with consumer protection that escrow is playing a role in now?
Andrew, there are many forums on the internet now, such as auctions or classified sites, where you could be buying something from a stranger.
Right, a lot of strangers on the web.
Yeah, so what the person who is buying would like to get the item in their hands before paying for it. The person who is selling would like to get their money before they're selling, they're sending the item.
So are you saying there's a potential for fraud here on the web?
There is definitely potential for
Are
fraud.
people being defrauded? Is that happening?
It is hard to quantify the percentage of people who are being defrauded, but certainly there are lots of cases where people are sending in the money through money orders and then either not getting any item at all or getting something which is not what they thought they were going to get. And similarly, sellers who trust the buyers and say, okay, I'm going to ship you the item, and once you like it, just send me the money, have the potential of getting defrauded.
Not getting the money on the long run. Okay, so iescrow comes along and you're facilitating this transaction. Tell me what your services offer.
Okay, the way our service works is buyer, instead of paying directly to the seller, puts up their money with iescrow. We hold on to the money and ask the seller to ship the item directly to the buyer. Once the buyer has received it and inspected it, if they approve the item, we release the funds to the seller.
Okay, so you hold the money while the transaction.
Yeah.
They have to set some kind of terms of the agreement. What does an inspection really mean, and the duration?
Yeah, the way a transaction works is either the buyer or the seller can start a transaction with iescrow by describing the price of the item, description, and other transaction terms such as who is paying for shipping, how much it's going to cost, and such other details like inspection period, which is the number of days that the buyer would have the item to inspect and possibly reject if they don't like it.
Right. Okay. Now, generally, who pays for this? Is it the buyer or the seller?
The money comes to iescrow from the buyer, and a smaller amount goes to the seller. And that's how the transaction works.
So the buyer is the one who's actually paying for the escrow transaction to take place.
The escrow fees could eventually come out of the buyer or the seller by adjusting the purchase price.
Okay, what does this cost for folks?
It costs 5% for most small dollar transactions, and then at very large dollar transactions, it costs less than that.
Okay, and people seem to be picking up on this, are interested in the idea. How many people are using it now, and what kind of growth are you seeing?
Oh, we used to have less than 5,000 registered users about 9 months ago, and we are at more than 60,000 registered users now. We are seeing a growth rate of around 20 to 25% month to month. And a lot of it is happening because consumers are actually feeling the protection both as a buyer and a seller.
Right.
I can give you an example. We had a buyer recently. She ended up bidding on an original Nagel painting, what was advertised to be an original Nagel painting.
There's a lot of original Nagel paintings out there, yes.
And she won the bid at $1,500. She was quite suspicious that it was a very good deal. So she ended up going through iescrow, negotiated for a 1-week inspection period with the seller. So she put up the money with iescrow. The seller sent the painting directly to the buyer. The seller was located in San Diego. The buyer was in New York City. Once she got the painting, she got it appraised, and turned out it was not original. So she ended up sending the item back to the seller, and once iEscrow had confirmation that the seller had received the item back, she was refunded her money.
Okay, great. Well, with the popularity of online auctions and millions of more people getting on the web, it sounds like a great concept.
Yeah, we are finding that users from all across the world are using this service. We have about 15% of our transactions from international users, and we are finding people are using these services for anywhere from $10 type transactions to thousands of dollars type transactions.
For URLs of today's featured websites, just go to the NetCafe site at cmptv.com. There have been lots of complaints by consumers about abuses in online commerce and the online auctions, trading, and so on. A lot of these complaints have been sent to legislators, so lots of state legislatures are right now looking at laws to regulate trading online to protect consumers. And actually, Andrew, we were going to have a guy here from Sacramento who works with the California State Legislature in dealing with consumer rights and consumer protection, but he's too busy in Sacramento and actually couldn't come over here to join us. So I thought we ought to talk about the site he has, though, because it is a terrific site for people interested in consumer advocacy, that's a hard word, and really doing what you can to influence the legislature and try to get consumer rights protected on the web. The site is consumernet.org. Have you had a chance to look at it?
I have, and I think the thing that strikes you right away when you come onto that site is people don't realize how much control they actually have in the legislative process.
Right.
If they actually,
well, it suggests you have power anyhow.
If people exercise and take charge of it. And I mean, there is certainly a whole host of things that people can do, at least to influence the legislature.
Well, what I like about the site, and I mean, it really is one-stop shopping if you really do care about this stuff. It has information on all the bills before all the legislatures around the country right now. If you want to know what's up there, you can do research. There's a library on the site to find out what the issues are. They have advice there how to write effectively to your representative in the legislature. For organizations that are promoting consumer advocacy interests, how to write an effective press release. You can broadcast your press release on their site. The site is updated almost every day from what I can tell, so it's really current information. Just lots of good stuff, because as you say, people say, what can I do? You know, can I do anything? Go to that site, and it really does give you the 1, 2, 3 as to how one person really can influence stuff, if you can influence regulation of the web. I don't know.
And I think that's the other sort of big question. Do you take all these steps, and does it fall on deaf ears? I know, like here in California, for instance, there's been some claims that legislators are slow to do any kind of you know, policing of the web.
Well, there's lobbying on the other side, of course. This is a big California industry, so you don't want to come down on them. The other issue is, can you really legislate, can California, the state of California, or any state, legislate the web, which by definition you don't know where the seller is, where the buyer is, they in another state, they in another country. I think there's some difficult issues there.
I agree. I heard somebody the other day say that, you know, they would like to just go buy a boat and just basically broadcast offshore via satellite, and they would be immune to any laws that anybody tried to put in.
Well, of course, a lot of the gambling sites, for example, are coming from offshore places to do just that kind of thing. But really, there's a lot of useful things. I'd really suggest people go there. Let me see, a couple of things I forgot there. They really do have a lot of their forums there that talk about the online scams. We've talked about a bit of this in the show elsewhere. Some of the investment scams, some of the frauds that are on there. I mean, it's freewheeling and it's wonderful on the web, but obviously people can take advantage of that freewheeling environment also. You ever been burned or had a problem?
No, I haven't, but you know, I've heard stories of people on auction sites. Actually, I have a friend who's an art dealer, and he said that someone offered an interesting piece of art, you know, and it turns out that it was actually someone going around and taking photos of pieces of art or pieces of you know, sort of tchotchkes in other people's houses, seeing if they could find a market for it before they actually went and removed the item from the house. So it was like sort of like a fencing operation.
Sell it before you steal it. Know if it's worth stealing.
Exactly. So, you know, there is a lot of potential
in terms of influencing legislation, you mentioned a project you're familiar with, which is really helping inner city kids learn about this process and trying to give them a sense of empowerment, that the consumer does have power and you really can do something about it, even if you're not only one person, but one, you know, little person with not a lot of resources.
Exactly. The program is called Youth in Government, and it's an offshoot of the YMCA, which is a national program. This is actually a national project. It takes kids from around the inner city areas around the country, and it teaches them how to write bills and laws that specifically affect things in their neighborhoods. A group of kids I saw worked on legislation to limit the number of liquor stores in their neighborhoods. So
and if they want help, they should go to consumernet.org.
For URLs of today's featured websites, just go to the NetCafe site at cmptv.com. While the web is creating some new consumer protection problems, it's also providing new tools for consumer advocacy groups to do something about that. Andrew is with a representative of a group called Consumer Action.
Kathy, you're from Consumer Action.
Correct.
I think the website is
consumer-action.org.
.org, okay.
Yes.
And you're a nonprofit here in San Francisco, and a lot of stories going around about, consumer protection or fraud and the internet coming on and that. You guys are actually a clearinghouse, among other things, for information to empower consumers and protect consumers. How'd you guys get started in that?
Well, we actually was established in 1971 as a volunteer organization and then incorporate later. But we have been always a nonprofit and private consumer education advocacy agency.
So this was way before the web.
Way
the web
before
came
this.
about.
Yeah, we started when this lemon law thing started. We actually helped set up that lemon law. Whenever you buy a new car, now you can file with the manufacturer, even as an individual consumer.
Right, that was a big thing here in California. I remember when that passed.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now the web comes along, and you've obviously got a bigger audience. What are some of the things that that you're trying to help people with, and who are the audiences actually you're helping?
Well, we really focus on the gaps that got missed out by government or some mainframe or major agencies, such as those don't necessarily speak English as their first language, or those disabled or older people, or whatever that usually get missed out.
Missed
so
by the legislature, by laws that are passed. And things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed like the multilingual part of your site is very powerful. Basically,
it's something
all the
that we've been
information.
trying very hard to maintain multilingual service, publication, hotline services, and try to involve them as well as represent this population, the so-called disadvantaged population.
Right. Okay. So give me an idea of. I was up there the other. I saw things on HMOs, and what are some of the popular areas that you're helping consumers and teaching them?
Well, we had a very long project on telecommunications since 1980s something, when all the Telecommunication Act started, deregulation happens. So all the telephone issues started, telemarketing frauds, caller ID issues, privacy issues, et cetera, et cetera. And then after that, we've been focusing more on banking issues. So all the bank mergers happen and other situations happen. Maybe you look at your bank statement today, the fees have increased incredibly, and the credit card frauds happen more often, and ATM card problems started. Everything
multiple
started.
ATM charges. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we
you
have,
offer suggestions on the site of
we
how
have
to,
done lots of survey on it too, pricing surveys, so people will know instead of search around by themselves. So-called shop around every bank. The bank don't tell you all the information, so you can look at our free surveys every year. It will be different to tell you what is the best saving, what is the best credit card rates, and what is the best long-distance carrier for your particular needs.
Right. And you guys have been very thorough. The surveys I could see, you spent a lot of time, and they look pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
Now the web, in addition to allowing people to receive all this information at home, you guys have a hotline, looks like a way for people to actually talk about or report consumer fraud. Just real quick, how does that?
We do have a phone hotlines that have operated for 20-odd years, and now people can just type their own little stories as long as they want, as detailed as they want, at midnight, when our operation is now obviously working. Then we can figure it out and reply at our leisure. So that really helps us to manage our staff time and among anything else.
And give people another channel.
Yes, exactly. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen for other languages here, especially Asian language. You can't type email very well in Asian language at this point. However, we do offer many multilingual, including 7 or 10 different languages publication on our website. And I just done a report today, we got like 53 download at Japan, all our Japanese publications on how to complain.
That's great. So
Yeah.
you're protecting people around the world. Thank you, Kathy.
For URLs of today's featured websites, just go to the NetCafe site at cmptv.com. And that's our look at consumer protection online. Thanks for joining us this week at the Net Cafe. Hope we'll see you here again next week at Club I in San Francisco.
The Net Cafe is made possible in part by BigStar.com, with thousands of videos and DVDs for the whole family. Additional support by TechWeb for up-to-the-minute technology news. And by TVA, Television Associates, bridging the worlds of computers and video with DVD authoring and MPEG encoding services.
To purchase a videotape copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-310-7850. Please specify the show number and the topic.